For most of the people who shape the board, the rails are the one of the most scary part in terms of shaping. But actually it's not. Actually, the rails are easy if you're gonna understand few key elements, and if you're gonna be following them, you're gonna be able to shape a perfect rail. We're gonna go two ways you can design a rail and then make sure that you're gonna shape what you design. So in order to have a perfect rail, all steps we did in the last videos needs to be done perfect. The better you're gonna do the previous steps, the better and the easier your rail is gonna be to do. Before we're gonna jump to designing and shaping our rail, there is one more thing that we need to focus, and it's called V. In general, we can say that the V is the one type of the bottom contour. So why we need to focus on it right now and not in the next episode where we're gonna be covering basically the bottom contours. If you are not planning to shape a V, you can skip to the another part where I'm gonna just speak about the race. If you're not gonna shape the V, you don't need that part. But why we need to speak about the V now? As in my opinion, doing this bottom contour before the rails gonna make shaping your rails easier and gonna help you to not overdo the rails on the tail area. But what is actually the V? Right now, this is how the bottom of our board looks. We have the rocker, but this, if you're gonna cut this slice or the slice here on the tail, this is how it looks. It's just a flat. We have a flat bottom. The V is the bottom contour where we taking off the foam from the edges and we are leaving the stringer the same thickness as it is. What that does, it lifts up your edges and creates the shape that is similar to the V. So what actually we are doing here? Are we shaping the bottom contour? Kind of, but I want you to think on a different level. And that level will be thinking about the rocker. So at that moment, we have one rocker across our whole board. What I mean, the rocker, if you're gonna put straight edge on the stringer, it's gonna indicate our rocker that we shaped. If you're gonna put the same straight line on the edges, at that moment you're gonna achieve exactly the same rocker. And this is our rail line rocker. So at that moment, our rocker is the same across the edge and across the middle section of the board. What V does is basically changes the rocker on the tail of your board on the edge. So the rocker over the stringer is smaller than the rocker over your rail. And that transition is the outcome of these changes into the rocker, which is our bottom contour V. So I want you to think about that as changing the rocker of your board in a specific place instead of shaping a bottom contour. And if you're gonna start to think that way, it's gonna also help you understand in the future why certain bottom contours works and not. Why I believe we want to have this now, as this is the really extreme example of changing our rocker over the rail line. And as we're gonna be shaping the rails today, in my opinion, doing this before rails is easier to do in terms of the V, easier to measure, plus it's easier for you to do the rail after. Because what we're gonna do, we're gonna take out the foam from the edges, from the outline of our board, and on the same edges we're gonna be working when we're gonna be shaping the rail. So I prefer to take it out now when my outline, my rail is still square, blend it nicely, and then based of that I still have a nice square rail to work. Otherwise, if you would shape the rail first, which totally fine, you can do it. If you want, you can do it that way, it's gonna work too. But in my opinion, it's gonna be harder. First of all, we're gonna be shaping way more foam, and though we're not gonna be doing this as much from the tail on the bottom as we want to have a straight edge there, you can find yourself that you're gonna be taking way too much foam from the top edge of your board over the tail, because you're gonna think that this looks bulky and chunky and understable. But if you're gonna take too much and then you're gonna want to do the V, you're gonna end up with super thin rail. This way is more bulletproof and it's gonna make your workflow way easier. So First thing, we need to indicate how far from the tail we want our V to start and finish. For that board, I'm still kind of debating, but I will stick to 10.5 inches from the tail, which is basically the measurement of my brakes. So I want this brake to be working quite nicely with the V for my tail. And what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna go and put the small dot with my pencil right over the edge. So basically only the thickness of the pencil is marked there, nothing else. Then what I want to mark is how big I want to have my V. So basically how much I want to lift my rail line rocker on the tail. In that case, I want to go within like 1/8 of an inch. This is the amount I want to take off. And yeah, it may seem that it's not a lot, but trust me, that makes a lot of difference. With my markings on, I'm gonna take my rasp and I'm gonna start from the place where my V is gonna be the biggest one. And I'm gonna start to slowly taking off the foam. Think about that the deepest part is here. So I want this part is the deepest one, this part is shallow one, but also think that way that the overall V one needs to go basically over like this 45-degree cant from the stringer. So as you can see, I'm starting taking the most of the foam where I want to have my cut, the deepest one. And then I'm gonna be slowly starting to feathering these things out to the center of the board. And once I have kind of a deeper cut here done, I'm gonna go from the stringer out towards the middle of the board with the 45-degree cant, like that. Sometimes you might feel that the bigger planer is kind of tough to fit in the small area, so you can easily take the small one and basically do exactly the same thing. Once this is done, go with your hard pad and remove all the scratches from the rasp. And putting more pressure on the edge, less pressure towards the middle, so I can nicely shape this V out. And 100% you're gonna finish with your stringer being quite high, so just go and remove it. Keep in mind that at that point in every step of the build, after every action, you want to come back and remove the stringer, cut the stringer to the depth of your thumb. And it needs to be, your hand plane needs to be set up to barely scratch the stringer and to be cutting just hair thickness of the wood, so you don't scratch your foam, but your stringer is nice and finished and it's not above the board. With that being done, this is how your V should look like. So here I still have a flat spot, and here is slowly start to rolling. And the more I'm going towards the tail, the bigger difference on the rise I have. Now let me do the second side. The second side is done. This is how the V looks. Be careful to not overdo it. In my case, this is a quite aggressive V, but I like this kind of aggressive V for the boards for the really small waves. I'm gonna explain why in the later. And in case you would overdo it, remember that you can fix it during the glassing on the one of the latest steps, but that's for the future. So, and this is what I meant why I recommend to shape the V before making the race, because this part of the tail is way thinner than it was before. Now, if you're not gonna be planning to have a V into your design, then probably also you should keep your tail slightly narrower That's the first thing. And the second thing, if there is like still too much foam here and you are not planning to shape a V and you want to have like more refined red, you can always take it down from the top to round it a bit more, or to down the deck from the from the top. So it all gonna go to this. Now, if I would, in my case, if I would shape my rail and then having quite a lot of thickness here, I would probably be taking way too much foam from the deck, you know, in order to have like better looking tail, and then I would go to my bottom contours and I would be like, yeah, cool. So I want to have a V, and now basically my tail would be like razor thin, which is not something that you want to have, especially with the tail, especially with the boards that are designed for the smaller waves. The tail needs to be shaped good and thin, but at the same time, like, you don't need to like have a sharp thin tail for the smaller waves. A bit thicker is a bit faster. So finally we can go and design and shape our rail. You have basically two options to do it. Option number one is to copy the rail from the existing board. The option number two is to design the rail from scratch without having the template of already existing rail. You need to understand few things. First of all is the apex. Apex is the border of your outline. This is the most further spot from the stringer. What the apex does is apex divides our rail for two rails, the top rail and the bottom rail, which is called usually bottom tag. First option is to copy the rail. In order to copy the rail, what we want to do, we want to take some kind of easy bendy wire, go to the middle of your board and just bend it. So just like that, we copied our rail from our existing board. What you would do, you would probably draw a rectangle, which is the thickness of your board. In my case is 2 11/16, because remember we still didn't add the concave, then will match my desired thickness of the board. So I have my rectangle, but we already learned and we already know that our PU blank is not perfectly square. It is slightly pre-domed. So if you would cut the size of our blank, it's not looking like that. It looks more like that, which is fine. So what we can do, we can basically take again a piece of wire and copy our blank. I just did it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Through our blank template within the rail area. So at that point, this is the rail we have. If I would like follow this line, you would see that it would go and exit my blank. And that's because this board that we copy the rail is just way thicker on the middle than what we are working here, which is not a problem for our designing phase. Now, what you want to do, you want to determine the apex of your board, which is in my case around here. This is our apex. Now what I want you to do is to add 1/4 inch above and 1/4 inch below. Nice. So this is what I added. So there is plus 1/4 inch down from our apex. So what we just create, we create our border that we don't want to cut. And when we're gonna go to shape the rail, this flat section is the section that we don't want to touch when we're gonna be adding our bevels. Otherwise, you can end up with a really pinched rail. At that point, what we actually want to do is determine the cuts you need to make in order to have the rail. So what I would do, I would just like put my edge and searching on this, I would see. But what I just marked where I need to do my first cut. So I can easily go, we know from till what point we want to arrive on the apex. And I'm gonna be measuring based on my red line, which is the outline of my already existing deck, not from the square that we drew at the first time. So roughly I want to do 3/4. So I'm just gonna write here. So my first mark onto the deck needs to be 3/4. Now I'm gonna do exactly the same thing, and to keep the thing simple, the first line you just cut, you want to cut it to the half. So I would measure the half, which is 2 inches. So I want to cut on one, up to 1 inch, which is just here. And what I do from this again, I would just draw another line. So from my apex to mark is basically 2 and a quarter, and this 2 and a quarter is by measuring from our apex, so from this border. Oh, sorry, that was my mistake here, because you see I did a mistake because I put my reference over the black line, and I don't want to put the black line. I want to focus on my red outline, which is my blank outline, because my blank is already pre-domed, so using this 90-degree square is not gonna work in our case. So actually I want to have like one, again it's gonna be 1 and 3/4, which is here, back it's like 1 and 3/4. Cool. At that point, referencing my blank, basically that is enough of what I need to do. If I want to copy the existing rail from the existing board, now this rail that I just like copy here is designed to be quite thick and to keep the blank quite flat across the all width, and then just the rail is just blending quite nice. But at the same time, my apex actually is quite low in that rail. Anyway, if you would want to tweak already existing rail and you would decide that it's quite too thick on the top, again you would just want to cut the bevel to the half, measure it, and then do another cut, split it to the half, and again another. You're gonna see this a bit more easier when we're gonna be actually be cutting, but basically the first two cuts are the most important one. If you're gonna make them good, your rail is done. Everything else, basically we can say it's pre-doming the deck, which we already have our deck pre-dom because it's a PU blank, and just in case you're gonna decide that you need it more, then you're gonna do and try to cut another bevels. But these two, the first two, are the most important one. Now let's move to the other part, which is my bottom tag. And basically with the bottom tag, if you're copying the rail, you're gonna want to go and do exactly the same stuff. Though with the bottom tag, there is only 2 cuts max that you need to do, no more cuts. So this is quite low apex rail compared to the modern existing rails across most of the boards. And I had a reason designing this rail this way, and it works for what I want. Actually, I really like that rail for my surfing. Then imagine that it's also quite thick rail for most modern boards. So I kind of mixed and matched two words. So I wanted to have a thick rail which gonna keep me volume and speed while surfing, but then I kept my apex quite low so I can dig my rail into the water and feather it out the rail on that part quite aggressive. So it's easier to grab the water while I'm going on the rail while surfing. Though this is, let's say, a bit already redesigned the rail and working on the really small factors. But you can definitely do it. You can definitely design the rail that way. But let's move and let's design the rail from the scratch. And how you design the rail from the scratch? I want to have my template of my existing blank. This is how the rail of my blank looks right now. And I want to design the new, completely new rail line. And I want to find the apex. And I would say I took this measurement from Kazuma. Based on that, I learned how to design the rails on my own, and it just works great. So no matter the rail you're gonna be designing, in most situations you want to keep the bottom tag, so everything from the apex down to the bottom of the board basically the same, and it's always gonna be the same even in the board I just copied the rail. The only reason why there's a slightly difference within the tag there is because I put my apex way lower, so that gave me less room for working with the apex. Anyway, to determine the apex, which, and that's gonna work for most of the any kind of shortboards, hybrids, fishes, whatever. What you want to do is you want to go and spot the first measurements, which is 1 and 8. Okay, so what I just did, I just drew two exactly the same, let's say, blank rail template that I created. I mark already my lines, so one more time, you're doing the line, which is line number 1 is 1 and 1 1/8 of an inch. Then from that you doing minus quarter of an inch, and this is your second line closer to the bottom. Again, you're doing minus quarter of an inch, and this is the third measurement third point from your bottom. The middle one is straight your apex. So the middle one is your apex, and all this flat area is your apex border. Let's call it like that. Apex border. Basically, you never want to go below that. Like you never want to have this flat spot narrower than it is right now. As long as you're not going for a very, very super pinch rail, but trust me, you don't want that. This stays how it is. Now, with that measurements, you're supposed to have roughly 3/8 of an inch distance from the bottom edge, and then you want to draw into the bottom the point which is 3/8 of deep. Then you want to cut this, and this is gonna be your first cut of your bottom tack. Now, second cut of your bottom tack, you're splitting the first cut to the half, you're putting the mark there, and on the bottom you're putting again the 5/8 mark, and from there you're putting the 5/8 mark, and again you want to cut this into the half. At that point your lower part is defined. Now you can go and start to play with your top rail. So let me just do it very fast. So if you're gonna look at that design of the rail that I just did, again, the bottom part is stayed the same as I showed you here, and the same as I have translated here, it stays the same. Now the top, what I did, I don't even know these measurements, I just add like really, let's say, random point over the edge of my blank. Then I just I put the line, divided to the half, put the dot here, add a bit here again by the eye, and again like by the feel. So roughly if we would draw our rail, we would we would roughly have something like that. And again, the bottom tag's gonna stay the same. Don't like this part of the rail. For my taste, I want to have it a bit more thinner than it is right now. I'm gonna design the new rail with the bottom tag exactly the same, and then I'm just gonna change the first cut a bit more further to the blank, and then again half, dividing almost to the halves, and let's see how it's gonna be looking with that new cut. So very fast I did way deeper first cut, and then split it to the half at the another cut, also quite deep to make it look all right, let's say. So if we would like drew the line, we would, let's say, we would end up with something like that. Then if we really will to extend to the actual thickness of the blank, that would look really weird. And although we would have this, let's say, the thickness of the blank we want, the amount of foam that we still need to take is crazy, and this is way too thin for the board we're designing and for what we want from that blank. Again, you may end up with something like that if you're gonna be doing the, let's say, high performance shortboard, but then the way I can bet the blank will be pre-domed, the blank will be pre-domed way more. So actually these cuts will don't need to be as deep to achieve the same result. For sure, I don't want to have something like that. So let me draw it one more time. So how I'm gonna be doing my first design that I did, kind of like it, but it's too thick. So this is gonna be my main reference point. And imagine I didn't even like check the measurements. I'm gonna check these measurements now and just add a bit more. And then the second rail that I designed, it's way too thin to my blank and to what I want to design. It will require from me to take way too much foam, which I don't want to do it, because also I want my blank to determine the shape of that rail. So if it's a flatter blank, because I choose the flatter blank, I want to have that volume in that flatter line and that thicker rail. Though there is some parts that I want to just refine for my own taste and for what I believe it's just gonna work. Okay, so this is what I end up designing, and let me go through one more time. The bottom design of the rail stays the same. All the points that I speak before are staying the same. With the top, yeah, I played around, so I don't have exact measurements like 1 inch, 2 inches. I keep it a bit more like I put like 1 1/8, 2 2.5 for my second bevel, and the 4 inches for the fourth bevel. Now do I'm gonna need to have the fourth bevel. I don't know. I'm not gonna be designing this here. If I'm gonna need to have one, I'm just gonna split the last bevel to the half, and that's it. So I'm gonna split all of these existing bevels one more time to the halves, and the only reason is you're gonna see in a second. So this is into the half, and yeah, and this would be more like that after. So basically I'm gonna connect all these lines so there is way less curves going on. And the reason why I want to do it, because at this stage what you just create, you create your own rail. So we can go take it, and I'm gonna, how good as I can, I'm gonna go and let's say cut my what you just did, you just design your own rail and you just cut your own template for the rail. Now of course this is not like a perfect cut, so it doesn't, when we actually gonna use this to check my rail, but of course it doesn't has to fit with like the millimeter of accuracy, because probably the error I introduced while cutting while hand drawing is way bigger than what actually I'm gonna get it clean when I'm gonna be shaping. So keep all of that stuff in mind. This is the way you can design the rail your own way without having the template from an existing board. But also I encourage you to design to copy the rail. What actually you can do the bottom, as I said, keep the bottom exactly the same always in every board, but then copy the overall rail and use the top part of the copied rail to achieve what you want, instead of doing this basically from the scratch as I did it. And actually if we're gonna compare them roughly, this is supposed to be more like that. Yeah, so if you would compare them, this one is actually way fatter than what I designed. And there is a chance that I'm gonna do like that. Depends how my rail gonna look after the first and the second cut. I'm gonna really rethink if I want to do the third cut. Now, usually you want to take a third cut to blend everything nicely, but as I'm okay with having a kind of more like stage, I would call it stage rail, because you can see like some rails has like flat deck and the like bevel and then the rail. So, and I forgot the name of it actually, but yeah, so I'm gonna think about the fourth if I want to cut it to make a nice fluent blend, or actually if I want to leave it a bit thicker. But we're gonna speak about that while we're actually gonna be working. So yeah, let's start to shape. Finally we have our template, let's work.